So oil became an asset in the context of ideas and understandings that depended upon certain scientific and technological developments that in their turn were the fruit of human creativity and imagination. So you can't talk about economics as if it is just about the material world. It actually has to do with that complex inner world through which human beings develop the ideas that then create the value that we attach to material things.
When you look at the kind of crisis that we have today on Wall Street and the way that translates into a very high probable outcome of greater socialism, not less freedom, as government solves the problem, comes in and solves the problem, and ends the experience of pain in the general public and by the general public. How would you strategize, if you will, a more positive outcome where, as faith-oriented people, we can engage with culture in the midst of pain and direct them towards being more self-reliant, not more government-dependent, taking responsibility for their own actions, not letting someone else stand in the gap for them? I think the need for leadership will be great, but defining the issue is pretty critical.
I think that the first challenge, and I think about this a lot, because the first thing that I think we have to do in this circumstance is to try to get people, as insofar as we can find them, who want to think about what's really important to them, right? And we are in a situation where, to be manipulated, we must accept the notion that what is most important to us is our material condition, yes? Mm-hmm. How much money you have in your wallet and what's going to happen to it and so forth and so on. To the extent that we accept that understanding, okay, we are then looking away from what we actually believe is important, because if you examine what leads most people to care about the money and the job and the work and the success of the enterprise, it really has to do with relationships in which their caring is not about the material thing, but about this person whose happiness they care about and that person whose future they would like to secure. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, the real priority is that we should be able successfully to contribute to, take responsibility for, help with individuals with whom we have those kinds of relationships. But that means, at the end of the day, our real priority, and the one that has given the impetus to the success of our economic life, is a moral priority, not a material one. And we live in a world, by the way, in which, for various reasons, ranging from terrorism and things like that, all the way over to the direct assaults that are taking place on basic ideas of family life and other things. We live in a world in which moral preoccupation is very close to the minds of many people. A matter of fact, one of the striking factors, 2.5 years ago, when they were doing polls, the number one issue on the mind of the American people was the moral condition of the country. Since that time, we've been battered by all these manufactured economic crises, and of course that has once again changed for the time being. But underlying it all, that is still the truth. Sitting around the dinner table, talking to each other when nothing else at stake, most people get around to making in some way or another the clear point that a lot of these problems are rooted in moral factors. I find it interesting, for instance, that the whole mortgage thing, right, has a lot of people sort of at some common sense level realizing that part of what was going on here was people who were anxious to live a life that was beyond their means. And folks will say that. They know that that's really what's going on, right? Well, that's a form of moral indiscipline. Yes?
Correct.
And at the end of the day, we know that it has something to do with this crisis. We can see all the ways it's been exploited for profit, all the ways in which government structures and regulatory things didn't do what they were supposed to do, or maybe did, who knows, and so forth. But at bottom, we also realize that, like many other things in life, the trap that kills you is the one you step into. And if you have the sense and discipline not to step into it, then you're not going to be in that problem. And so I think that one of the key challenges right now is to try, in spite of everything that's going on, to focus people on and make them confident in their sense of that moral priority. That, of course, you have to do through to discussing these economic things, but you must make sure that you don't give in to the temptation to do it as if they're isolated from these more fundamental facts.
Well, and going back to Aristotle, whether it's talking about economics and politics, his book on happiness, the Eudaimonia Ethics, what is eudaimonia? What is happiness? Well, we've had competing views, and much of that has, as you just said, been tied into material well-being and a notion of the good life, which is, frankly, a fantasy and very disconnected with the things we really do care about, family, relationships.
Well, see, this is one of the things that I think has been most dismaying about recent events, because if there was a hope that, in some immediate sense, this kind of thing would be presented in a way that had its ability to move people, that was effectively arising in the context of some of the real circumstances that we're dealing with, but at the same time took seriously the set of issues that address the moral and spiritual dimension, that was what should have been going on and should have been offered by the Republican Party. But sadly, I think culminating in the choice of McCain, the party has abandoned the effort. And what's left of it is simply being used to manipulate people for political purposes. It has no real substance anymore. And so in that sense, we face a challenge of trying to push forward substantive leadership that will do what the Republicans promised to do and never did.
Well, we're very interested to know the speech that you're preparing on the real meaning of economics. If there's a way for our listeners to be privy to that speech, or to see a copy of the speech, perhaps you can let us know how they can to stay afoot of that.
I have a website, alankeyes.com, and a lot of the things that I do will either be put up there or links will be put up there that would allow people to listen to the MP3 that we'll be making and things like that.
Well, as fast as you can get them up, I think you'll have thousands of our listeners clicking through to download those MP3s.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, Dr. Keyes, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And we'll look forward to perhaps having you back. We'd love to see you in the Oval Office if that's something that the people will ever consent to. We hope that the educational process gets speeded up and more awareness is there of the changes that need to occur, and that courage is something that people will practice in the political process.
I certainly hope so. I think one of the things that could help to turn this country around completely is the day we have an election where the outcome completely surprises those who have manipulated the system.
We're looking forward to that day. Well, you've been listening to the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. I'm Kevin Orrick, along with David McAlvany and our guest, Dr. Alan Keyes. You can join us at McAlvany.com, McAlvany.com, or feel free to call us at 800-525-9556. Thanks for listening.
This has been the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. The views expressed should not be considered to be a solicitation or a recommendation for your investment portfolio. You should consult a professional financial advisor to assess your suitability for risk and investment. Join us again next week for a new edition of the McAlvany Weekly Commentary.